Thanks so much for watching Ebra News Live this New Year's Eve. I'm Francesca Maxime. Here's a look at the top stories making headlines all around the world at this hour. And the White House and Congress remain at an impasse over the fiscal cliff, with the combination of tax increases and spending cuts expected to plunge the nation into a second recession if an agreement isn't reached. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton remains in a New York hospital at this hour, with doctors diagnosing her with a blood clot after she fainted earlier this month, suffering a concussion. In India, a terribly sad story for wildlife lovers as a passenger train traveling through a remote region crashes into a herd of elephants. The outcome was not good. And it is New Year's Eve after all, so let's take a look at the celebrations for this holiday, from China to Australia to the UK to New Zealand. We'll take a peek at all the parties going on around the world. Well, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton was admitted to a New York hospital Sunday after doctors discovered a blood clot stemming from the concussion that she sustained earlier in December. The location of the clot has not been revealed, but Clinton's spokesman said she is being treated with anticoagulants and would remain at New York Presbyterian Hospital for at least the next 2 days or so doctors can monitor the medication. Clinton fell and suffered a concussion while alone at her home in mid-December as she recovered from a stomach virus that left her severely dehydrated. The concussion was diagnosed December 13th, and Clinton was forced to cancel a trip to North Africa and the Middle East that had been planned for the following week. Clinton was also forced to cancel a December 20th testimony before Congress about a scathing report into the September 11, 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya, that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Well, it is winter after all. On to the weather. A storm dumped about a foot of snow in the northeastern United States, leaving New England residents joining in the cleanup of their community.
New England was covered in a thick blanket of snow on Sunday after a winter storm dumped up to 30 centimeters of snow across the northeastern United States. Residents of Rhode Island spent the day outside, shoveling snow from steps and blowing it from driveways. At the Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, home to the New England Patriots, volunteer crews helped clear the snow, which started falling on Saturday afternoon. The National Weather Service had also issued winter storm warnings for parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey and New York. Police reported dozens of accidents, mostly involving cars slipping off snowy roads.
And over to the Midwest now, a tour bus careened through a guardrail along an icy Oregon highway and several hundred feet down a steep embankment on Sunday, killing 9 people and injuring more than 20 others. This, according to authorities.
You could see it, like you had almost like duck not to be hit by a fender or some exploding plastic grill. It was unbelievable.
There was some ice down here on the road and apparently hit the patch of ice, lost control and went down the hill.
Well, the charter bus in Oregon carried about 40 people and lost control around 10:30 in the morning on Interstate 84 in a rural part of Oregon. The bus crashed near the start of a 7-mile section of road that winds down a hill and comes to rest at the bottom of a snowy slope. The bus did land upright, though. More than a dozen rescue workers descended the hill and used ropes to help retrieve people from the wreckage in that freezing weather. 5 people suffered non-life-threatening injuries in a 20-vehicle crash during heavy snowfall Saturday in New Hampton, New Hampshire as well. Well, the fiscal cliff, it has been talked about to no end, but the White House and Congress remain at odds over how to solve their disagreements over tax hikes and spending cuts. It is an impasse that could plunge the economy into a second recession.
Barely 24 hours before a deadline to avert tax raises on virtually every American, top Senate negotiators worked to prevent the government from going over the fiscal cliff. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said he had yet to receive a response to an offer he made on Saturday evening to Majority Leader Harry Reid, the top Democratic negotiator.
There's no single issue that remains an impossible sticking point. The sticking point appears to be a willingness and interest, or frankly, the courage to close the deal. I want everyone to know I'm willing to get this done, but I need a dance partner.
Despite indications of progress in the negotiations, Democrats said Republicans were proposing to slow future cost of living increases for Social Security recipients as part of a compromise to avoid the cliff. Democrats rejected the idea.
We're willing to make difficult concessions as part of a balanced, comprehensive agreement, but will not agree to cut Social Security benefits as part of a small or short-term agreement, especially if that agreement gives more handouts to the rich. With 36 hours left until the country goes over the cliff, I remain hopeful but realistic about the prospects of reaching a bipartisan agreement.
McConnell and Reid were hoping for a deal that would prevent higher taxes for most Americans while letting rates rise at higher income levels, although the precise point at which that would occur was a major sticking point.
Well, on to Europe now. European financial markets are responding to the failure of the White House and Congress to come to some kind of agreement, indicating that export markets would suffer if the onslaught of U.S. tax increases and spending cuts would come into effect, threatening the Eurozone's rocky path to growth.
Germans have been burning off the excesses of Christmas, taking a break from the woes of the Eurozone debt storm. But they shouldn't ignore America's race against the clock to stop itself sliding off the fiscal cliff. With just hours to go, economists like IG's Brenda Kelly say if the massive onslaught of tax hikes and spending cuts happen, it could strike a lethal blow to Europe's export markets.
Ultimately, the main funding will come from the US and foreign investment from there as well. So if we see a pullback, maybe 5 to 10% in their GDP growth over the coming years, then it will be problematic for Europe and in particular Germany, which has ultimately done quite well by diversifying its export sector away from Europe, and America will be the one fly in the ointment if it does fall over the fiscal cliff.
Many of Europe's politicians support strict austerity when it comes to Eurozone strugglers like Greece and Spain. But they think America should keep borrowing to support global growth. In her New Year address, the German Chancellor stressed the Eurozone's problems weren't isolated.
There needs to be much more done on an international level to provide better checks and balances on the financial markets. The world hasn't sufficiently learned the lessons of the devastating 2008 financial crisis. Never again can we allow it to happen in a social market economy. The state is the guardian of order, and that is something people should be able to count on.
European shares rose 16% in 2012, but they were down a fraction as the US deadline approached. Justin Urquhart-Stewart from Seven Investment Management says the markets need to see confidence from the politicians.
Although margins are going to be coming down from their peak, it was as good as it gets probably last year, you're still going to see companies producing reasonable cash positions, still paying dividends. So I'm actually relatively optimistic, particularly if that mood music changes with the US maybe then sorting out its fiscal cliff and continuing its growth, China showing stabilization and starting to grow again more effectively, and then looking to Germany to actually, with its election, to probably start seeing the start of a movement towards growth in the Eurozone.
If the US Senate doesn't agree, Obama can still pass legislation to limit the damage. But the last thing Europe needs is anything that will threaten its already difficult path towards growth.
Well, Europeans all across the continent expressed their hope that 2013 would bring better times after a year of economic turmoil that affected much of the region.
I really believe that within 2013 we will see that Greece will retain its the current outlook of a politically stable country, which will help economy a lot.
We think that 2013 is going to reserve some very, very good surprises if Monti gets reappointed.
Well, in Greece, which is stepping into its sixth year of recession with unemployment and poverty rates still rising, Greeks remained optimistic that things would improve. Athens is getting a total of 49.1 billion euros in bailout cash through March. Over in Italy, one analyst said 2013 would be a good year for Italian financial markets, especially if Monti wins, Mario Monti. He was appointed to put Italy's economy on a more fiscally responsible path. took over the post of premier after Silvio Berlusconi was forced to resign, but then had to step down this month after Berlusconi's party withdrew his support. So, over in Spain, their outlook, however, remained more subdued, with one analyst saying the main challenge would be to create new jobs. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that their state must watch over the market to prevent the excesses that led to the 2008 financial crisis. To South America now, Venezuela's vice president says that President Hugo Chavez is confronting new complications due to a respiratory infection nearly 3 weeks after undergoing cancer surgery in Cuba. Nicolas Maduro looked weary and spoke with a solemn expression in a televised address from Havana Sunday. He did not give details about the complications, but described Chavez's condition as delicate. Maduro arrived in Havana on Saturday in a sudden and unexpected trip to visit Chavez. The Venezuelan leader hasn't been seen or heard from since undergoing his fourth cancer-related surgery on December 11th. Government officials have said that he might not return in time for his inauguration for a new 6-year term on January 10th. Before leaving for Cuba, Chavez acknowledged the precariousness of his situation and designated Maduro as his successor. Now to the conflict in Syria. Today, online video shows further attacks in the suburb of Damascus, with panicked civilians fleeing what appears to be airstrikes. One clip posted by activists is said to show an airstrike near Hamouria, a northeast suburb of Damascus. A voice off camera can be heard saying that the strike had hit nearby East Ghouta in the northeast district of Douma. Two other separate clips showed panicked civilians in Douma fleeing the sound of a large explosion. Also, today, the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, that's an activist group, said that rebels were clashing with government forces near a number of military bases in the country's north, as well as in the central city of Homs and in suburbs southeast of Damascus. Well, to India now. Earlier today in New Delhi, there were calls for New Year celebrations to be canceled as the city continued to mourn the 23-year-old student victim of a brutal gang rape.
New Year is all about celebration, it's about happiness, and right this time we are not at all happy. No one is happy at this moment. So there's no point celebrating New Year. And I think we should, we'll celebrate in the sense that we'll start it with a resolution that women should be free of violence and expecting something from our government.
Victim, who has not yet been named by authorities, died Saturday as a result of an attack on a city bus on December 16th. 6 men have been arrested and charged with murder following that attack. India's Army and Navy have canceled New Year's celebrations out of respect for the victim. Earlier today, protesters held a candlelight vigil close to the Parliament building in memory of the student. There have been calls for tougher rape laws, major police reforms, and a transformation in the way the country treats its women following that devastating attack. Still in India now, a passenger train plowed into and killed 5 elephants as the herd crossed railroad tracks in eastern India Sunday.
Ranger Officer Ramba informed the railway control room that the elephants are moving towards railway line, but after that they told that already Coromandel Express is going and we cannot stop that. So in the process, accident had occurred.
Terrible news. Well, a railroad spokesman said the train struck the animals, including a calf, early Sunday. The Wildlife Department accused railroad authorities of ignoring his department's warning the train should slow down because a herd of elephants was moving into the area. The railroad spokesman said the warning came too late. Dozens of elephants have died in India in recent years after being struck while crossing railroad tracks that often run through national parks and forests. India's wild elephant population was recently estimated at around 26,000. Not a good year for rhinoceri either. 2012 was a deadly year for South Africa's rhinos, with the rate of poaching increasing yet again.
2012 was a deadly year for Africa's rhino population. By mid-December, 633 rhinos had been poached in South Africa, the country home to most of the continent's rhinos. Julian Rademeyer, journalist and author of Killing for Profit, says rhino killings have been rising year after year.
I think there's increasing demand. We've seen more than 600 rhinos poached so far this year. Last year it was 448, the year before it was 333. We've seen a steady increase year on year for the last sort of 4 years. In many ways, demand seems to be growing exponentially.
Rhino horn has been valued for centuries in Chinese medicine, where it was used to treat a range of maladies including rheumatism, gout and even possession by devils. Demand has recently been growing in Vietnam, where a newly affluent class has been buying it to treat ailments ranging from hangovers to cancer. Poachers are said to enter South Africa from neighbouring Mozambique, where observers say the horn is often smuggled out through the same routes used to bring illegal drugs from Southeast Asia into Africa.
All right, well, on to a little bit of a lighter story. Now, might you like a luxury timepiece to count down to the new year? Well, one company in Indonesia is combining traditional woodworking with new technology to produce unique and personalized watches.
The majority of watches worldwide are factory produced and made of plastic or metal. These ones, however, are handmade from Indonesian tropical wood. 27-year-old watch collector Lucius Warang met 32-year-old self-taught watchmaker Haki Santha as a result of their mutual passion. They decided to launch the watch line Lucius & Key in 2009. The young watchmakers chose wood because it represents Indonesia as a country well known for its lush tropical rainforest. Since everything has to be handmade, they only make about 25 watches a year. And demand has been growing.
Some people told me, why would I buy a watch like this rather than buying a famous designer brand? First of all, I support entrepreneurship. Second of all, this watch is different in terms of the dial is made of wood. I haven't seen that with other watches. So to me, that's very, very unique.
Since its launch, Lucius & Key has gotten a positive response from watch collectors around the globe. Many of their customers come from Italy, South Korea, and the Middle East. The watches start at $1,500 and go up from there. Going forward, the pair may hire additional watchmakers, but that would mean that Haki must find someone who fits their style.
I'll take one of those. Well, if you love to swim but are not a huge fan of the tons of chlorine often found in regular pools, here's a new invention that you might want to try out. It is called the Eco Pool, and it's taking off in South Africa.
An environmentally friendly eco-pool is catching on in South Africa. Not only can you swim in it, but the water is good enough to drink. Nicholas and Jabsi Lowe enjoy swimming in their pool as much as any other kids do.
I've swam in the chlorine pool, but I get in and I feel, after I get out, my eyes start to get sore and I just don't feel as good as when I come out of this pool. I actually feel like I don't need to bath at the end of the day.
It's an eco-pool, which means plants extract natural nutrients, leaving nothing for algae and bacteria to grow. Since converting the original chlorine pool to this natural system, a myriad of wildlife has been drawn to it.
We've seen a few tadpoles, and we've even got a brown water snake in the pool.
What bothered me the most about the salt and the chlorine was backwashing out. Like, where's all this backwashed water going and what's in this water? Really, I didn't want that. And then I didn't want that going and polluting further downstream.
Jerome Davis, who has a PhD in aquatic bioengineering, builds eco-pools in Cape Town.
We've got much higher temperatures and we've got much higher solar radiation. And we've got a much longer growing period. So everything happens a lot faster. So we've got a completely different plant assemblage that we're also working with. There's a lot more biological activity going on.
When not swimming, Jabsi and Nicholas scour the water plants growing on a bed of pebbles, which acts as a filtration system. Typical finds include tadpoles, baby tilapia, and dragonfly larvae.
All right, I guess you can literally swim with the fishes, then it'll be all right. All right, well, while the ball has yet to drop in New York City's Times Square, New Year's Eve is already underway in other parts of the world. In Australia, Sydney's skyline erupted with tons of exploding fireworks as more than 1 million revelers cheered in the new year from the city's crammed harbor shores on the world's first major celebration for 2013. Sydney's balmy summer night was split by 7 tons of fireworks fired from rooftops and barges and a nearly $7 million pyrotechnic extravaganza billed by organizers as the world's largest. On to New Zealand, their main city. of Auckland became one of the first to ring in the new year, with onlookers gathering at the harbor to enjoy the fireworks display as well. As the clock struck midnight there, fireworks were set off over the city's 1,000-foot tall sky tower near the harbor to the sound of boat horns. Yeah, you can hear them there. The South Pacific nation is one of the first to greet each new year because of its proximity to the international date line. On to China now. In China, around 100,000 people gathered to watch celebrations in Hong Kong as a massive $1.5 million fireworks display exploded in the sky, said to be the biggest ever in the southern Chinese city. Ushering in the new year, Hong Kong Feng Shui master Raymond Low predicted that 2013 would be less turbulent than 2012 because the Chinese New Year in February will usher in the year of the snake, as opposed to the dragon. The buoyant economics of the Asia-Pacific are prepared to party with renewed optimism despite economic threats from the so-called fiscal cliff. Moving on now to Europe. Edinburgh, Scotland kicked off its traditional New Year celebrations on Sunday with a torchlight parade and fireworks as the Scottish capital geared up for a 3-day party. They know how to do it over there. The city has established itself as an international center of New Year celebrations, with the official Hogmanay event now in its 20th year. An estimated crowd of more than 100,000 people from more than 50 countries were all expected to join locals for this year's events, which include a performance from the 80s pop group, one of my favorites of all time, Simple Minds. And of course, the ball will drop in New York City in just a few hours, right near where we are here at Ebru. Well, as 2012 does come to a close, we here at Ebru News, we all want to leave you with a look back at some of the major events that shaped our news coverage over the last year. We wish you and your family the very best in the year to come, and we look forward to continuing to bring you the latest headlines from the U.S. and around the world. Happy New Year.
Tonight we made history. Second term as President of the United States. Your nomination for President of the United States. Called Rhodesia. I can't tell. We also have fewer horses and bayonets. Big Bird. It's me, Big Bird.
He was a baby. He was my baby.
Not as cynical as the pundits believe.
The Atlas V with curiosity about lifelong home.